Most people ask, how do I become more successful? Or what are the habits that change everything? But the most important question isn't how or even what. It's why. Why do successful people swear by waking up early? It's easy to assume they do it because they're more disciplined, more motivated, more structured. And while that may be partially true, the real reason is much deeper. It's not about the hour itself. It's about what that hour represents. The early morning isn't just time, it's freedom. It's clarity. It's ownership of the one thing most of us give away too easily: attention. See, when we wake up and immediately reach for our phones, we surrender. Not in a dramatic way, but in small, almost invisible choices. A notification here, a message there, an email demanding our focus. And before we know it, the day isn't ours anymore. It belongs to everyone else. But the people who rise early, they don't just wake up before the sun, they wake up before the noise, before the demands, before the world tells them who to be. And that space, the silence of the early morning, is where the most important work begins. Not the work on spreadsheets or inboxes, but the inner work, the kind that shapes the outer results. Because if you think about it, what does it mean to lead, to build, to grow? It means having a vision, a direction, a voice. And in a world that's constantly pulling us in 100 directions, the only way to hear that voice is to get quiet, to listen. And there's no better time than the early morning to do that. That's why the most successful people wake up early, not to squeeze in more tasks, but to create more space. Not to do more, but to be more. I remember meeting a leader once, a woman running $1 billion company. I asked her what her morning routine looked like. She told me she wakes up at 4:30 a.m. every day. I asked her why, expecting a list of to-dos or productivity hacks. But her answer stopped me. She said, because it's the only time the world isn't talking to me. It's the only time I get to ask myself, who am I becoming? That stuck with me. Because in leadership, in business, in life, it's so easy to get caught up in the urgency of doing, the meetings, the metrics, the movement. But very few take time to stop and reflect on being, who we're becoming, where we're going, what it all means. That reflection requires space. It requires stillness. It requires an intentional pause before the momentum of the day sweeps us away. And that pause is found in the early morning. We think of success as a result of hard work, yes, but more than that, it's a result of clarity. Knowing what matters most, knowing what to say yes to, and more importantly, what to say no to. Clarity is rare, but it's not impossible. You just have to know where to look for it. You don't find clarity in the chaos. You find it in the quiet. And the quiet lives in those early hours before the city wakes up, before the emails start, before your calendar takes control. That's where you meet your why. That's where you reconnect with what matters. Most people try to change their outcomes by focusing on tactics. They chase new apps, new routines, new schedules. But the people who actually shift their lives, who make real lasting change, they start by reconnecting to something deeper, to purpose, to meaning, to identity. And identity isn't built in the noise, it's built in the quiet when no one's watching. That's the opportunity the early morning gives us. It's not about impressing others, it's about aligning with yourself. And when you do that, when you start your day grounded in why, everything else changes. The way you walk into that meeting, the way you talk to your team, the way you make decisions, it all becomes rooted, not reactive. Purposeful, not pressured. The truth is, you don't have to wake up early to be successful. But almost every successful person I've ever met chooses to because they understand the deeper value. They're not chasing minutes, they're chasing meaning. And the morning is where that meaning is easiest to see. Because when the world is quiet, you begin to hear what really matters. You start to think not about your to-do list, but about your life list, your legacy. You begin to feel the weight of your choices and the gift of your time. You start to recognize that every morning is a new vote, a vote for the future you want, a vote for the leader you're becoming, a vote for what matters most. And yes, it's hard. Waking up early goes against comfort. It goes against convenience. But leadership always does. Because leadership, real leadership, begins with self. That's why the early morning matters. Not for the hours it adds to your day, but for the intention it adds to your life. So the next time you hear someone talk about waking up early, don't ask what time their alarm is set for. Ask what they're waking up for. That's the question that makes all the difference. Because in the end, it's not about waking up at 5 a.m. It's about waking up to your purpose. And that starts in the quiet long before the rest of the world opens its eyes. Then we wake up. The very first decision we make is whether we're going to own the day or let the day own us. Most people don't realize this. They think their day starts when they walk into a meeting or respond to their first email. But by then, it's already too late. Because the most important battle of the day is fought in the first few minutes after your eyes open. Successful people understand this. They don't start their mornings by reacting. They start by claiming their time. They don't wake up and ask, what do I have to do today? They wake up and say, who do I want to be today? And that simple shift from reactive to intentional is the foundation of how they lead, live, and succeed. Think about it. The world is always pulling at us. Messages, notifications, expectations. From the moment we check our phone, we're already behind. We're already in response mode. We become firefighters, constantly putting out other people's fires, instead of builders, creating something of our own. But there's a small window every morning where we get to decide who's in charge. That window is sacred. It's the moment before the noise begins. And if we don't protect it, we lose our power before the day even starts. I met a founder once who told me that the most important thing he does each morning is nothing. No emails, no texts, just a moment of silence. I asked him why. He said, if I don't own the first hour, the rest of the day belongs to everyone else. That's the key. The morning is a line in the sand. It's the place where we draw boundaries between what's urgent and what's important. And when we don't make that distinction early, we spend the rest of the day confusing movement for meaning. Waking up early isn't about proving something, it's about protecting something. It's protecting your thoughts before they're hijacked by noise. It's protecting your time before others start spending it for you. It's protecting your identity before the world starts defining it for you. And if you've ever felt like your day gets away from you, like you're constantly chasing instead of creating, like your time isn't really your own, it's probably because you're waking up into someone else's story. But when you wake up early, intentionally, not accidentally, you start writing your own story first. You step into authorship, not just activity. And that changes everything. I've seen this pattern over and over again in the lives of leaders who truly inspire. CEOs, athletes, creators. They all have different routines, different goals, different personalities. But the one thing they share, they take the morning personally. Not because they're robots, but because they're human. And they know how easy it is to forget what really matters when you're caught in the current of what's loud and urgent. So they start their day with what's quiet and essential. The truth is, the world will always be noisy, there will always be meetings to attend, people to reply to, decisions to make. You don't escape that. But the people who rise above it, the ones who lead from a place of strength instead of survival, they don't let the world speak into them until they've spoken into themselves. They start with silence, or a walk, or journaling, or just sitting with their coffee and their thoughts. It's not the activity that matters, it's the ownership. They claim their time before the world can take it. And that ownership sends a message not just to the world, but to themselves. It says, I am in charge of how I show up. I decide what matters today. I start from intention, not obligation. We live in a time where being busy is glorified, where hustle is worn like a badge. But being busy is not the same as being in control. Hustle without purpose leads to burnout, not breakthrough. And the only way to stay aligned with purpose is to make space for it every single day. That space is most available in the morning, not because the hours are magic, but because they're yours. And when you consistently claim that space, something shifts. You stop reacting to every message, every problem, every distraction. You stop living on defense. You begin to move from a place of vision, not pressure. You begin to lead your life instead of being led by circumstance. It's no coincidence that many of the most successful people don't just wake up early, they look forward to it. Not because they love alarms, but because they've learned to value what the morning gives them. Perspective. Perspective is what reminds us that not every email is urgent. Not every invitation deserves a yes. Not every request needs a response. But without claiming your time early, you won't have the space to remember that. You'll just dive into the day like everyone else, hoping to stay afloat. You don't need a perfect morning routine. You just need ownership. You need to wake up and say, before I do anything for anyone else, I'm going to do something for the vision I believe in. That can be reading, thinking, planning, reflecting. It doesn't matter what it is. What matters is that it's yours. Because the minute you wake up and hand your attention to the world, you're no longer the driver, you're a passenger. But successful people don't ride along, they lead. And that leadership starts the moment they open their eyes, not to an inbox, but to intention. So if you want to change your days, don't just change your calendar. Change the way your day starts. Protect the first 30 minutes like your life depends on it. Because in a way it does. Your vision, your energy, your clarity, your power. It all begins there. Own your morning, or someone else will. We've been taught that mornings are for getting things done. That the early hours are the perfect time to knock out tasks, respond to emails, or finally get ahead on that to-do list. But the most successful people approach mornings differently. For them, the morning isn't just about what they do. It's about what they see. They don't just wake up early to be productive. They wake up early to visualize, to imagine, to reconnect with their vision of who they want to become, not just what they want to accomplish. That's the difference between people who simply get through their days and those who use each day to build something bigger than themselves. When we start our mornings purely focused on doing, we become efficient machines. But when we start them with a moment of vision, we become something greater, leaders with direction. And direction matters more than speed. Because if you're heading fast in the wrong direction, getting there quicker doesn't help. It only means you arrive at the wrong destination sooner. People who build extraordinary lives don't wake up just to grind. They wake up to align. They give themselves space, not just to plan the day, but to picture the future. Not just what they'll achieve, but who they're becoming in the process. I once spoke with a high-performing executive who told me she wakes up at 5 a.m. every morning, not because she's obsessed with getting ahead, but because that's the only time she can think without interruption. I asked her what she does with that time. She smiled and said, "I imagine what kind of leader I need to be today." That stopped me. She wasn't jumping straight into checklists. She was asking herself questions most people don't think about until it's too late. Questions like, what do I stand for? What energy do I want to bring into the room? What kind of impact do I want to leave behind? That's vision. That's the kind of clarity that moves people, not just because it sounds inspiring, but because it leads to action that's grounded in purpose. When you wake up early and choose to give the first moments of the day to visualizing your future self, something changes. You begin to carry yourself differently. You walk into rooms with conviction. You make decisions with clarity. You stop reacting and start responding with intention, with direction, with meaning. Vision isn't just a strategy, it's a mirror. It reflects who you are and who you want to be. But you have to be willing to look into it. And you can't do that in the middle of a chaotic day. You have to do it in the quiet. That's why early mornings are so powerful. They give you access to that mirror before the noise fogs it up. I think one of the biggest mistakes we make is confusing busyness with purpose. We assume that if we're doing a lot, we're doing something important. But action without vision is just movement. And not all movement leads us forward. Some of it just keeps us spinning. When you carve out time in the morning to visualize not just tasks, but your trajectory, you anchor yourself. You stop being swept away by the urgent, and you stay connected to the important. You stop measuring success by how much you did, and start measuring it by how well you stayed aligned. It's in these early moments that leaders define their tone for the day. And that tone becomes contagious. If you walk into the office frantic and distracted, your team feels that. If you walk in centered and focused, they feel that too. Energy is contagious. And your morning is where you choose the energy you'll pass on. Now, visualization isn't about daydreaming or fantasy. It's about preparation. It's about mentally rehearsing what kind of person you need to be to meet the day ahead. If you're facing a challenge, you imagine handling it with poise. If you need to have a hard conversation, you picture yourself speaking with honesty and empathy. You see it before you live it. And that changes how you live it. Some of the most resilient, creative, and effective people I know use this practice daily. Not because they're perfect, but because they understand that clarity must be cultivated. It doesn't show up on its own. It's something you have to fight for, to make time for. And early mornings give you that space. What's powerful is this: even 5 to 10 minutes of visualizing the right things can rewire how you experience your entire day. It trains your brain to look for alignment instead of approval. It reminds you that you're not here to just tick boxes. You're here to make a difference. And difference always starts with vision. Because here's the truth: people don't follow your plan, they follow your passion. They follow your presence. They follow your belief in what's possible. But you can't inspire anyone else if you're disconnected from that belief yourself. So how do you reconnect? How do you remember what really matters? You get up before the noise. You sit in the stillness. You close your eyes not to sleep longer, but to see clearer. And you ask yourself, Who am I showing up as today? Who do I want to become, not just this week, this quarter, this year, but in this very moment? Then you begin your day from that place, not as a task manager, but as a vision holder, as a person who's not just chasing results, but shaping meaning. You can live your life checking boxes, or you can live your life creating impact. That choice is made in the margins, often in the quiet hours when no one's watching. The world doesn't reward us for vision we keep to ourselves. It rewards us for vision we live out loud. The world doesn't reward us for vision we live out loud, and the first person who needs to believe in that vision is you. So wake up early, not just to get ahead, but to get aligned. Not to do more, but to see more clearly. Because when your vision is strong, your actions follow. And when your actions follow vision, you don't just succeed. There's a moment in every person's day that defines who they are. It's not the big presentation. It's not the tough conversation. It's not even the decision to take a risk or play it safe. It's the moment they choose to show up before anyone else does. To take initiative, not because someone told them to, but because they believe in leading, not following. Successful people understand this. They don't wait to be told what to do. They don't sit around hoping for clarity to strike or for permission to be granted. They wake up early because it's the most powerful way to remind themselves, I am responsible for how I show up today. And more importantly, I choose to lead from the front. What makes someone a leader isn't the title they hold or the number of people they manage. It's the willingness to go first, to step into the unknown, to do the hard things before anyone else even thinks to. That's what showing initiative looks like. And that's why the morning, those early, quiet hours matter more than most people realize. Because the truth is, the world trains us to wait. Wait for feedback. Wait for direction. Wait for someone else to make the first move. But people who create meaningful impact don't wait. They step up. And they usually start long before anyone is watching. It's in the morning, when it's still dark outside, when most are still asleep, that the real leaders begin. Not by barking orders, but by preparing their minds, setting their tone, and owning their direction. They don't need a spotlight. They're not motivated by applause. They're driven by something deeper. The belief that their choices shape more than just outcomes. They shape culture. I once worked with a founder whose team looked up to him, not because he was the smartest in the room, but because he was the first one in the building every single day. No fanfare, no announcement. He simply believed that if he was asking others to show up with energy, focus, and commitment, he had to model it first. Not once, not when it was convenient, but every day. That's the kind of leadership people remember. Not the loud declarations, but the quiet consistency. And it all starts with initiative. A mindset that says, if something needs to happen, I'll be the one to start it. Waking up early is a physical expression of that mindset. It's not just a habit, it's a message. A message to yourself that says, I'm not waiting to be led today. I'm showing up first. But let's be clear. This isn't about being first for the sake of ego. It's about being first because you understand the responsibility of leadership. It's about setting the tone, not just for yourself, but for everyone who follows you. In every team, in every family, in every organization, someone sets the emotional temperature. Someone walks into the room and either lifts the energy or drains it. Someone decides whether the culture is one of action or apathy. Leaders, real leaders, take that role seriously. They understand that initiative isn't about always having the answer. It's about stepping forward even when you don't. And so how does this connect to waking up early? Because initiative begins with intention, and intention needs space. Most people are so reactive in the morning, they don't even realize they're starting the day in survival mode. Snooze button, rush to get ready, scroll through notifications, already behind, already overwhelmed. But when you wake up early, you create a moment to ask yourself, what kind of leader do I want to be today? Not just in big decisions, but in small moments, when your colleague needs support, when the meeting gets tense, when things don't go as planned. The way you respond in those moments is determined by whether or not you've prepared yourself ahead of time. And preparation takes initiative. Initiative says, I'll lead myself before I lead others. Initiative says, I'll do what's hard now so that others can benefit later. Initiative says, I won't wait for the perfect time, because the perfect time is the time I choose to begin. One of the most powerful leaders I've ever met shared something that stuck with me. He said, people don't need you to be perfect. They need you to be present. And presence starts before you even walk in the room. What he meant was, your ability to show up fully, to lead effectively, and to inspire authentically doesn't begin when the meeting starts. It begins in the moments you choose to take initiative, long before anyone is watching. So what does that look like in practice? It means using the first hour of your day to get clear, to ground yourself, to choose your posture, not to check off tasks, but to choose how you want to serve. It means recognizing that how you start determines who you become. And who you become is what people follow. If you want to lead a team that takes ownership, take ownership of your own time first. If you want to create a culture of accountability, be accountable to your morning intentions. If you want people to step up, let them see you doing the same. When no one's asking you to, when no one's giving you credit, when no one even knows. Because that's what real initiative looks like. It's not a grand gesture, it's a quiet decision. A consistent action. A pattern that eventually becomes part of your identity. And identity, once rooted in initiative, becomes unstoppable. So wake up early. Not because it's trendy, not because someone told you to, but because it's a daily declaration. I don't wait for things to happen. I lead the way. In those first few minutes of the day, you're not just setting your alarm clock, you're setting your standard. And that standard becomes the example others follow. Not just today, but every day. There's a universal truth that's often overlooked in our fast-paced, hyper-connected world. Clarity doesn't come from doing more, it comes from creating space to think. It's in the quiet moments, not the noisy ones, where our deepest ideas are born and our best decisions are made. That's why the early morning is sacred ground for successful people. Not because they're obsessed with time, but because they're intentional with it. When you wake up early, you're not just getting a head start on the day. You're creating space to hear yourself think. You're carving out mental room to pause, reflect, and ask the questions that rarely get asked once the chaos begins. What matters most today? What do I need to say no to? Am I still moving towards something meaningful or just moving? The world is loud. It pulls at us from every direction. Notifications, meetings, deadlines. Everyone needs something. Everyone wants a piece of your attention. And slowly, without realizing it, you stop leading and start reacting. You stop thinking and start responding. You stop creating and start copying. But the people who rise above all that, the ones who lead from clarity instead of confusion, make a different choice. They wake up before the world gets loud, and they sit in the quiet. Not because they're avoiding the world, but because they're preparing to face it with intention. In that stillness, something powerful happens. Clarity returns. I once had a conversation with a creative director at a major brand. He told me the most important part of his day was between 5:30 and 6:30 a.m. I asked him what he did during that time. He said, "Nothing impressive, I just think." He went on to explain that once the calls started and the decisions began piling up, his brain belonged to everyone else. But in the early morning, it was still his. That phrase stayed with me. My brain is still mine. That's what early mornings give us, the chance to be in control of our minds before the demands of the day take over. It's not about filling that time with more tasks or faster hustle. It's about giving your mind the one thing it rarely gets: space. And in that space, we begin to see what really matters. We begin to separate the urgent from the important. We remember our values. We remember why we started. We remember that success isn't measured by how busy we are, but by how aligned we remain. The problem is, we're not trained to make space. We're trained to move quickly, to respond instantly, to check boxes, to chase what's next. But speed without clarity is just chaos in motion. And no amount of hustle can make up for a lack of direction. That's why successful people don't just work hard, they work intentionally. And that intentionality is born in the spaces they create for themselves, especially in the morning. Waking up early is about reclaiming that space before the calls, before the meetings, before the inbox fills up. It's your chance to connect with your own thoughts. Not the thoughts of the crowd, not the demands of your to-do list, your own thoughts. And those thoughts, when nurtured in silence, become clarity. Clarity about your goals, clarity about your values, clarity about how you want to show up, not just for work, but for people, for your team, your family, yourself. Because the truth is, we don't drift into clarity, we drift into confusion. We drift into noise. Clarity takes effort. It takes discipline. It takes a commitment to carving out the time and space to return to center again and again. And that's the power of early mornings. They're a daily invitation to come back to center, to step outside the whirlwind of responsibilities and ask, am I still aligned with what matters most? Without that pause, we lose sight of the bigger picture. We get caught in the micro, forgetting the macro. We optimize for efficiency and forget about purpose. We become productive, but not fulfilled. But when we start our day with clarity, everything changes. Decisions become easier, priorities become obvious, distractions lose their power, and maybe most importantly, we stop chasing every opportunity and start choosing the ones that actually fit. A senior leader I once met described her morning clarity ritual as her leadership meeting with herself. No phone, no laptop, just a notebook and a question. What does leadership look like for me today? She wasn't waiting for a meeting to define her day. She was defining it herself, in the quiet, on purpose. That kind of leadership doesn't happen by accident. It happens through the discipline of clarity. And clarity is born in space. Not more apps, not more meetings, not more content, just space. And space is exactly what early mornings offer, if we're willing to claim it. This isn't about being a morning person, it's about being a purpose-driven person. And purpose-driven people understand that their mind is a tool, and like any tool, it needs maintenance. It needs reflection. It needs direction. Waking up early gives you time to set that direction before the noise begins, before others tell you what's urgent, before the outside world hijacks your attention. You get to say, this is where I'm going, this is how I want to show up, this is what I'm committed to today. And when that becomes your habit, when that clarity becomes your starting point, your days stop happening to you and start happening through you. You become the leader others look to, not because you have all the answers, but because you consistently return to the questions that matter. And you answer them, not once, but every single day. So if you've been feeling lost, scattered, stretched too thin, don't look for the next hack. Don't download another productivity app. Just wake up a little earlier tomorrow. Sit with your thoughts. Listen to what your own mind is trying to tell you. Ask yourself the hard questions and trust that the answers are already there, buried under the noise, waiting for the space to rise. Clarity isn't a luxury. It's a responsibility, especially if you lead others. Because people don't follow the loudest voice. They follow the clearest one. And that voice, the one with clarity, conviction, and calm, gets louder in the silence of morning. All you have to do is wake up and listen.